Hello and welcome to Astrology and Cinema in Real Life. I have a treat for you because I have brought on Margaret Cahill, the amazing publisher for the Wessex Astrologer, the award-winning Wessex Astrologer, and this also happens to be the publisher for my book, Mirror, Mirror. Over 100 films went into this, a lot of work, a lot of charts, which Margaret and I will talk about and probably not be able to keep our faces from expressing the stress that we had to go through. So, Margaret, welcome and thank you. We're celebrating 4 years of Mirror Mirror.
No, thank you. Thanks for inviting me on. I can't believe it's 4 years. I think I'm still in therapy for that. That was a really, really big task.
It was.
But I felt it's such a satisfying one.
So today it arrives, the proof of Mirror Mirror. This is our first glimpse.
We've been waiting for this.
Oh
We've been waiting for this for months.
It took 8 weeks to write, a year and a half to edit. Here we go. I can't wait to see it. Oh my God. I didn't get to the gym this morning because I've waited for this.
Oh no.
I like to go to the gym first thing in the morning so my day can only get better. But here we go. Here we go. Oh my God. Oh my God. It is fantastic.
Yeah, you like it?
I love it. Woo!
That was a really, really big task.
It was.
But I felt it's such a satisfying one.
Just a little background on this. So I said 100 films. I think it was originally about 200 films, and we pared it down to 104. And each film that we did had a chart, had three charts in one chart, so a tri-wheel. So it had the real life person in the middle, and then the actor who portrayed them on the outside of that, and then the transits. And you think, oh, you only have to do that 100 times. I think I did it more like 1,000 times. I had to redo the charts. And then I kept realizing little things, like if I did a tri-wheel, the nodes fell off and I had to manually put them in, or something. There was one time when the moon wasn't going through.
Symbol. Yeah, the retrograde symbol kept disappearing, or the stationary symbol. When we did a tri-wheel, I think we had to get Roy involved because the retrograde symbol disappeared.
It was a lot of hard work, but now that it's been achieved and published and looking good, I mean, now when I look back on it, I feel really happy about it, because it was a pain. I remember thinking this is too big for me. I think I've bitten off way more than I can chew, and I nearly gave up a few times, thinking, oh, maybe I could just release it in little chapters or something on my website or something. And I was worried that I was stressing you out too, because it got a little stressful, but it was lockdown and we had nothing else to do. At least I had nothing else to do. I wasn't teaching. I was just kind of twiddling my thumbs, waiting to go back, waiting for things to calm down out there. And so we did a little release, which I'll put the link in the comments so you can find if you want to go back to those good old days of lockdown. But for me, the experience, I really enjoyed writing the book. I've been collecting biopics for years, and so I actually enjoyed it. And the actual writing itself didn't take long, but the charts is what took forever. And but Margaret persevered too, and we got the job done. So Margaret, I've told people to ask questions and to get involved with this if they had anything they wanted to ask a publisher. And I think one of the questions that comes up a lot is, how did you get started with the Wessex Astrologer?
Frustration, actually. I started astrology classes in 1996, and I couldn't get hold of the books I wanted. So, there were long delivery times. It was back in the day, we had to order books. It took 6 weeks for them to arrive. And I'm much too impatient. I'm much too cardinal for that. So I was in this astrology group and I thought, well, if I can get some books, then everybody else who's also frustrated can get them. So I went into the bookshop and I saw the sticker on the back of one of the books. with a phone number very helpfully. So I just phoned them and said, can I buy some books from you for our astrology group? And they said, yeah, sure, we'll give you 40% discount. What do you want? So I got started selling books. That's how actually Wessex started. And then the books I wanted were going out of print. So the very first one, very poignantly actually, was Moment of Astrology that I wanted to read. And I couldn't because it was out of print. So I wrote an old-fashioned letter, because that's what we did in the 90s. I
We
wrote a
actually
letter,
did.
stamp on it, um, and wrote to Geoffrey Cornelius. And he said, would you like to have it reprinted? Having never published a book in my life. And at the time he said no, but he said he'd come back to me. But then I got to know Camilla, and Camilla Sutton and I, really good friends going back to the mid-90s. And she wanted to write a book and I wanted to get publishing. So we kind of learnt together, really. So I just learnt on the job.
Mm.
So that was the first book.
Wow. And
Yeah.
well, what a book to start off with. And you did some of Nick Campion's and Aaron Sullivan's, Judy Hall's. Um, you've have published quite a number of really well-known astrologers who I'm sure
Yeah.
really deeply appreciate your work. And I was absolutely so chuffed to see you be appreciated at the conference this year. So,
Oh,
long time in coming. I was very, very happy for
oh,
you. But you just
thank you.
you have to remember to always add award-winning
I
publishing to
know.
everything you do.
We added it to the banner. I really didn't want to, but the person who does our website said, no, come on, we've got to have it. So we've got Charles Harvey Award as one of the banners. But I just wanted to
Um,
say, I think it's obviously the authors that make it. We've got 28 authors and we've got 105 books in print now. And our policy is that the books always stay in print. With other publishers, they'll do a print run which will pay off the initial costs, and then the book often will go out of print or get remaindered. And I think that's just wrong. That's, people have poured so much effort. The authors have poured so much effort and experience into the book. And
mm,
so it's my mission is to keep them in print. Unless there's a very good reason for them to not continue, then we keep them in print, even, after the authors have passed. I think it's really important.
mm.
So, all hail to the authors.
Yeah, and just on, from an author's point of view too. I mean, I think there's it is like having a baby. Your books are your babies, and you worked really hard on it and on them. And I think one thing that, authors have to get used to is being criticized
Mm.
and being able to work with suggestions. And you made an absolute diamond of suggestion in Mirror Mirror, because of the 104 films, I wanted them chronological, starting with Matahari and ending with, I think Rocket Man would have been the last one. We did it chronologically. And you said, how about if we do it by theme, planetary theme? And at first I was like, oh, yeah, sure, why not? And I wasn't quite too sure about it, but then it ended up being a genius idea. And so the movie we're going to look at today, we're going to remember to talk about the planetary chapter it's in, which is Uranus. And it's one of Margaret's favorite films, which is Amadeus.
I was the most famous composer in Europe until he came. This man had written his first concerto at the age of 4. He was playing music for kings.
Here is our court composer, Maestro Salieri.
Do you know, I actually composed some variations on a melody of yours. Well, I'm flattered. Funny little tune, but it yielded some good things.
And it came out in 1984. I remember it clearly. I saw it in the cinema. I had just started university, away from home for the first time, didn't have to call my mother to tell her I was going to be late. And I just remember being absolutely blown away by this film. So while I get the screen set up, Margaret, maybe you could tell us what you liked about this film.
I remember it being the most incredible shock to my senses, actually, in a way. It was so glorious and so loud and so in your face and so colourful, and all the pageantry of the court. And of course, Mozart being an absolute nutcase, his amazing laughter and the rich music, and it was just like being in a completely different world. It's 3 hours, isn't it? Something like
It's
that.
a very long film. Yeah, 3 hours.
Yeah, but there was no sense of God, he's going to finish it. You know, it was like, I can't leave the room, even though it was a video, as we were saying, actually, old-fashioned VHS cassette.
Yeah.
You know,
Because
that,
we couldn't find this film on Netflix or on Amazon. It's only in I don't even have a disc player anymore.
no,
So I had to figure out a way to watch it again. But yeah, I mean, I think everyone when they talk about this film, they don't. It's always I think the costume designers won an Oscar as well.
yeah.
Absolutely lavish. And Elizabeth Barrett, who played Mozart's wife, she nearly was played by Meg Tilly, who was an Agnes of God. But unfortunately, Meg Tilly had a ligament injury. She's a ballet dancer, had a ligament injury. Mark Hamill nearly played Mozart. Mark Hamill was
Wow.
Luke Skywalker. And I believe Tim Curry was going to play the F. Murray Abraham part. I think that's right, because they were on the Broadway production of Amadeus. So, you know, I can't imagine the film with those actors in it. And I clearly remember Tom Hulce as Mozart, and we were all blown away. Remember, we're just young adults away from home for the first time, and just being blown away by seeing Mozart, you know, on screen, and learning so much about, you know, his character. We know he was a nutcase, you know,
Absolutely.
at
Yeah.
least the way Tom Hulce played him. And F. Murray Abraham I'd never heard of before, and I haven't seen too much of him since. But you know, he was so masterful in that role, and you know, really hard to imagine someone else playing that role. But I just you know, we were so blown away by this film, and the way this works is that we're going to talk a bit about each real life person. Then we put in the actor who portrayed them in a bi-wheel. So I'm looking at two wheels and see the connections and how they might have stepped into that role. And then finally the transits, because you know, when we're talking about Oscar winners, you know, what is going on, you know, when the film was released. And I take the first release of the film, because sometimes films are released in different countries at different times. But I use the first release because from that point on is when people start to hear about the film and write reviews and things like that. So that's the day I use. So, you know, I didn't think this is a terribly attractive cover for this movie. It's kind of misleading because the actual set designs were so lavish, and then we got this rather plain and you know, kind of dull cover for the film. But anyway,
I suppose it's the underlying sinister
yeah,
side of it, isn't it? With Salieri, there's this kind of supposedly mentally ill person, because he has a breakdown, doesn't he?
he does,
I
but
guess it's implying that, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, they took a lot of liberties with the plot line, but Salieri was a real person. And you know, did he kill Mozart? No, he didn't kill Mozart. There might have been, they might have bumped into each other every now and again, but there wasn't this intense jealousy the way they portrayed it on the film. And just to remind you, remind people who might have forgotten that the film opens with Salieri in an asylum, and he's claiming that he killed Mozart. He drove him to exhaustion, and you know, he has to recognize Mozart's genius. So the theme running through the film is intense jealousy of Salieri towards Mozart, who was this young, energetic, extremely talented composer in the court. And Salieri just, you know, tricked him into all sorts of stuff. But anyway, here's Salieri's chart. Now, this went into the Uranus chapter. So just pointing out a few things. Salieri was a Leo, and kind of like a super Leo, because he's got 3 planets conjunct in a sign that we would associate with people who are in show business, maybe people who might be full of themselves because they have a lot of, they want to be noticed for their talents. And so, you know, looking at his chart, you can kind of think, wow, okay, well, Salieri, you know, was a bit of a showman. But then you see that it's opposite to Uranus. And I think here's where it kind of turns on its ear. You see, Uranus is a planet that I think like causes a revolt of some sort. It really changes the game. And if you have somebody who's full of this Leo energy, opposite to Uranus, you might have a personality that might be a little bit more generous than the typical Leo energy. And the other thing I thought was really interesting is that Uranus wasn't even discovered when Salieri was born. Uranus was discovered maybe 40 years later. So I thought, wow, now do we use Uranus or not? And of course we do. We use Uranus, or at least I use Uranus, because it adds a little bit of, I think, character and texture to the person. And Margaret, if you feel like you want to add in something, I'm just talking to
Yeah, one
hit
thing I
the main
noticed,
points.
well, when I was looking through again to read that chapter, and one of the things I noticed is that both Salieri and F. Murray Abraham both had Mercury opposite Uranus,
Mm,
which I hadn't noticed. And this was the joy of sorting it into chapters by planet. And I think there were some of the films actually that we couldn't decide whether it should go Mercury or Uranus. We had to kind of choose some of the films, didn't we? Which chapter they would go into. But there's also, I think, with that Uranus as well, there's that kind of manic edge as
yeah.
well. Their thought processes, the way that they communicate, there's that sort of Uranian kind of out there feeling, isn't there?
Because Mercury, at least the way I work with Mercury is kind of like the pieces of information, and Jupiter helps us to expand on those things. So it's like if a child is learning how to read, the sounds that the teacher makes and the child imitates, that's mercurial energy. So this is just theoretical. It's nothing, set in stone. But I think often people who have Mercury making contacts to Uranus might have a little bit of difficulty in the learning to read stages, or maybe they communicate in ways that aren't quite as conventional, or they don't learn it in that traditional kind of setting. So we have Antonio Salieri, who clearly expressed himself better through music than he did through words, at least in the movie, at least. But let's look at F. Murray Abraham. Now, I have the charts together, so we're just going to have to look for that Mercury opposite to Uranus. So we have, here we have F. Murray Abraham's Mercury in Scorpio, opposite to his Uranus, natal Uranus in Taurus. And so Margaret's absolutely correct that they have it both ways. And maybe this is one of the reasons why F. Murray Abraham played the part so well, the different way of communicating, because Salieri in the film didn't actually say a whole lot. It was more through his gestures and more through what he did, and he was tricking Mozart into doing a lot of work. That's how Mozart died. He was told that he had to do this requiem by a certain time because they needed the money, and then he just died of exhaustion. There's some really real trickery going on there with that Uranus opposite to Mercury, and F. Murray Abraham, played it right so well that he won the best Oscar. But I also see that we have F. Murray Abraham's Chiron on Salieri's Venus. So, oh, sorry, that's not Venus. I beg your pardon. We have, I don't know what that is. I beg your pardon. I don't know why is that showing up there. Is that right? Oh, no, that's Venus. I beg your pardon. It is Venus. So we have somebody who is able to tap in and understand the pain and anguish that Salieri felt, because Mozart was this, young upstart, new to the court. Here he was an established part of the court and the king's favorite or the emperor's favorite, and Mozart was outshining him. And so I think, F. Murray Abraham did a very good job of, stepping into that kind of agony, or that kind of, I wish that, where's all my attention? Why don't I get, all the pats on the head that I used to get, and in favor of Mozart?
Yeah, he was very empathic, wasn't he? I think that's why Salieri was such a strong character. And that's the way he portrayed him. That's why he was so strong. He really got into his head.
Yeah, and we don't have the timed chart at F. Murray Abraham, but if you look over here at the moon would move, this is the noon chart for F. Murray Abraham, it would move 6 or 7 degrees in either direction, meaning that it would still be in Pisces, no matter what time of day he was born, which is Salieri's moon as well. So I often find that there's, when there's a lunar connection, there's a better understanding of the person's motives. Maybe they can tie into the person's history a little bit better. And so for historical character, that might have been an advantage for F. Murray Abraham to get in there and to really understand. And then there's that Venus-Mercury conjunction on Salieri's descendant, you know, so an understanding of, you know, how how Salieri relates to other people or doesn't relate to other people according to the film. And then of course that scorpionic energy is real sort of, you know, a little bit underhanded. Well, in Salieri's case, a lot underhanded in trying to do better than Mozart. Okay, so is there anything else that you would like to touch on, Margaret, before we go on to the transit?
No, let's have a look at the man himself.
Okay, well, we got to look at the transits first. So the movie was released 6th of September, 1984. Oh, by the way, this is a really good reminder for me to say that I post little things about anniversaries, birthdays of celebrities that appear in the book or who are going to appear in volume 2. And I just did a little celebration of the release of Amadeus a couple weeks ago. So we had the anniversary just over 2 weeks ago. So there's some stuff on my Instagram about that. So we're looking at now at the transiting planets for when the film was released. And we can't get too excited about F. Murray Abraham's midheaven because we're looking at a time chart, but we can get a little bit excited about that Pluto being right on Antonio Salieri's Chiron. And what we see is from the very beginning is a very sick man. He was in an asylum and he's asking a priest for absolution for the sin of killing Mozart. And you know, he's clearly old and unwell in these scenes. But you know, again, a really good job. I kind of, when a very attractive person puts on makeup that makes them look unattractive, I think that's kind of brave. You know, kind of like Charlize Theron did in Monster, playing Eileen Vernos. You know, very beautiful woman. You know, putting on prosthetics to make herself far less attractive than she is in real life. Even if it is a role, I think still takes a lot of bravery because usually when people are in front of the camera, they want to look their very best.
Yeah.
And so F. Murray Abraham did walk away with the Oscar that year. And Amadeus put Antonio Salieri on sort of on the stage. People didn't know who Salieri was unless they'd seen the screenplay or been to Broadway to see it on stage. But when Amadeus came out, suddenly everybody knew who Antonio Salieri was, what he did, or what he allegedly did. And you know, it was like the new wave of Mozart. I remember because I was in marching band, and when this film came out, everybody was nuts about Mozart. You know, I think we even did a special little tribute to Mozart. Everybody wanted to listen to Mozart, get into the music a bit more. And whereas Mozart was, although he's popular, you know, people know his name, it made his music a lot more, gave it a breath of fresh air. And
the background to it as well. Yeah, like, you know, that Requiem was finished after Mozart died, wasn't it? And,
yes.
And I had no idea. And I loved Mozart's music anyway, because I was having piano lessons at the time. Not very good pianist, I have to say. And it just so inspired me because I had a sense of the kind of life he had, even though obviously it was extra colourful because it was in a film, but the whole interplay with Salieri and the difficulties they had between them, it changed the way that I saw the music, and I'm sure it did a lot of people.
Yeah, well, I think it just made Mozart popular again. And it's interesting to think, you know, when we think about popular music nowadays and how much music has changed and progressed over the years, you know, well, we can think back to, you know, Salieri and Mozart as being like, you know, the really big pop stars of their time. You know, their music was super popular.
Yeah.
And Mozart's complexities of his music, you know, when the emperor says there's too many notes, you kind of think, well, you know, that was his style. That's, you know, he brought Baroque music into style, and that's the way, you know, that was his gift to us. You know, all these little extra notes, these little things he put on onto little endings to measures and things like that. So, you know, it had a huge cultural impact.
Actually, that's something that I noticed as well, is that they started using, you probably have heard about this, but they started using Mozart as background music for children when they're reading and when they're learning. And they measured their brain waves, and they discovered that, especially with Mozart, when you listen, you have a kind of a different activity in your brain. And when my sons were at school, as they filed into assembly, there would be Mozart playing in the background, and the head teacher did that deliberately. And so they'd all sit there quietly waiting for everybody to file in with Mozart playing, because he wanted them to have the right start to the day. I think that's fascinating. So all those extra little notes actually do something. It's like he tapped into something without knowing it, I think.
Mm. Well, I mean, the whole entire thing about the music's effect on the brain is absolutely fascinating. And you know that if you play very lively music, it does affect your mood. It can lift you up. If you play melancholic music, it can chill you out. You know, the music does definitely do a lot for I think for self-care, you know, for moderating our moods and keeping us on an even keel. I am somebody who likes to have music on all the time. I don't often sit in silence. Maybe I would talk a lot less if I had to sit in silence. But anyway, okay. So let's move on to Tom Hulce. Now, I think Tom Hulce is Mozart first, but I think Tom Hulce was so gracious because he and F. Murray Abraham were both up for Best Actor, and F. Murray Abraham won. But Tom Hulce was so gracious. They cut the camera to him, and he was like, maybe he was tearful because he wanted the Oscar, but he was so happy, for F. Murray Abraham, or at least maybe he made it seem like he was happy for F. Murray Abraham. Very gracious of him. But before we get to Tom Hulce, let's look at Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So this is his chart, and curiously, I got time charts for both men. So well done to our European people who keep track of times of birth, because we don't do it here in England. But this, as I said before, this film went into the Uranus chapter, and I'm sure that you probably spotted it. Mozart's natal Uranus is conjunct his south node in Pisces, which also picks up Salieri's moon in Pisces. So it's hard for me to imagine Piscean energy fighting or arguing or competing with each other, but that's the way the film was set up. But you can imagine, if you add in that Pisces and Neptune itself often rules music or has something to do with the musical process, we're starting to pick up some themes of why this film had this appeal, this mass appeal. Because classic composers, unless you're a music major or you've grown up with classical music, it tends not to be something that people study and listen to. And as we said, this was a film about music, about classical music. And we can also look down, Uranus rules the sign of Aquarius. Some astrologers want to argue with that, but we can see that Uranus rules Mozart's Saturn, Sun, and Mercury. And talk about all those extra notes and the Baroque style of music. If we take it that Mercury also has a hand in music, in composition, we can see that effect is there too. He revolutionized music. He changed the way we appreciated music, and he certainly changed the style, and that he is remembered to this day. It's not just because of the film; it's because he made memorable music, which is pretty good for somebody who lived nearly 300 years ago.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
It is. And because we have a timed chart, we can also look at the moon conjunct Pluto. Mozart had some very unusual weirdness about him. And I don't want to say too much because I don't want to get banned from YouTube, but I'm just starting to pick up. Oh, by the way, and if you're listening, I'm trying to get to 500 subscribers so I can start doing all sorts of fancy little things. So please, if you're listening and you're enjoying this, please give it a like or subscribe. That would be fantastic. But Mozart had some really unusual tastes. I'll just park it there and not say too much. They did cover this a little bit in the film. And he's got that nodal axis running right across his ascendant and descendant as well. Mars in Cancer, good for tapping into the emotional elements of the music that he was producing. But a fascinating guy, and he's got Neptune opposite that stellium in Aquarius I was talking about, picking up Salieri stuff in Leo too. So they definitely had connections to each other. but whether or not it was a rivalry, like it was played in the film, is very, very, very unlikely. They didn't see each other that often, and Salieri had his own stuff going on to be that jealous of Mozart. So let's look at Tom Hulce's charts and what he's picking up with Mozart. Now, Tom Hulce was a guitar player, not a piano player, but he learned all of Mozart's repertoire on the piano and could play it. And he also, there was a scene in the movie, they're at a party and they flip him over and he plays it backwards.
He plays it up, yes.
And I don't know how he did that. But Tom Hulce is actually playing. He's not just wiggling his fingers. He's actually playing. I can't play what he was playing the regular way.
I couldn't play it regular. No, I don't think I tried it that way. That was quite amazing.
But this film is actually a part of some curriculums in that they're studying it to hear if there's a difference between the way Mozart would have played it. That people get the music out and they follow along. If there's a difference, and there wasn't a difference. So if you think about the amount of work and talent and well, just practice hours that Tom Hulce would have had to put in order to perform these well, one was a stunt, but perform this music. I mean, it's phenomenal, and I'm full of admiration for actors who learn new skills. I always talk about Margot Robbie, who pretty much learned how to ice skate for I, Tonya. And Louise Eddington and I were talking about Val Kilmer playing Jim Morrison. Val Kilmer was singing all those songs, and Marissa Abella was singing Amy Winehouse's songs and Back to Black. And so Tom Hulce put in a phenomenal amount of work into playing the part of Mozart. So let's have a little look at the Synastry. And I was immediately drawn to the Mars in Libra, Tom Hulce's Mars in Libra conjunct Mozart's Jupiter. So here we can see some real energy going into, I think, because a lot of Mozart's scenes were to do with his relationship with his wife. And they were absolutely charming scenes. We see them when they're newlyweds. The wife, Constanze, is absolutely devastated when her husband dies, of course. She plays that supportive, very supportive role of the wife. They were very childish, I should say. And there was just this absolute charm of seeing these two young people goofing around, here's Mozart, one of the greatest composers who ever lived, goofing around with his wife, cracking jokes and being a little bit obscene every now and again. And Mozart could talk backwards too. Apparently that was one of his little tricks that he used to do. Now we can't take Tom Hulce's moon and get too excited about it because it's a noon chart, but we can say that Tom Hulce would have definitely had the moon in Sagittarius, which would have matched Mozart's moon in Sagittarius as well. And we can
with that
also
sun there as well. That's the first thing that hit me, because it's like he's with his sun on Mozart's Pluto. That's like him shining, like you said, he just brought Mozart straight back into everybody's minds with the film, didn't he? He's literally shining sort of a whole bright light on Mozart's depth and complexity. Regardless, because obviously, as you say, we can't take the moon into account, but it's like you've got the closest thing to the moon and the furthest thing from the moon, haven't you? And the two, like the actor and the actual character, it kind of comes together in the middle, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah, and so just to back up too, to say that we have both actors have connections to the real life character, which I think arguing astrologically is what makes it work. Is that they had this connection. But I also think that Sun conjunct Pluto, a horrific scene at the end where they were just throwing Mozart's body into an unmarked grave, covering it in lime, and I don't think people realize that actually happened. He was buried in a pauper's grave. So even though he was this great composer, left us his wonderful legacy of music, we don't actually know where he's buried.
That's pretty sad.
It was a shock actually to think that's what happened to him. Well, Tom Hulce is a Detroit boy. Um, gotta love Motown, right? The reason why I'm laughing is I'm from Detroit as well. So you know, I always get a little bit excited when I see someone is from my hometown. Okay, so Tom didn't win the Oscar, but he was nominated for the Oscar. And so we got to be careful again. We're using a noon chart, but we can look at Tom Hulce's Chiron on Mozart's Imam Cheli, his IC. And so, you know, he's pulling up, he had this connection to his father, Mozart's father, that is in the film, that I think came out very strong. Mozart was kind of scared of his dad in the
Mm.
film. You know, his father was a very serious, very influential person, and there's his son kind of with that crazy laugh of his, and you know, getting into all sorts of things, going to parties, overspending, all these sort of things that his father didn't approve of. But Mozart wanted more than anything, according to the film, to have his father's approval, and that his father died without giving that approval was a very painful thing for the Mozart and Amadeus. A few other good things that are interesting going on. We have the South Node conjunct Tom Hulce's Venus in Sagittarius when the film was released. And I think that manic energy that Tom Hulce brought to the film, you know, before we started recording, Margaret, we were saying that laugh, Mozart's laugh, is the first thing that you think of.
Absolutely, yeah.
When
I
someone
can
talks
remember it
about
now, and I haven't seen the film for ages. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was doing some preparation for this, and what Tom Hulce had to do when they went back into looping. Looping is when an actor goes back to the sound studio to fix up some lines. He couldn't find that laugh again, and so it would have caused all sorts of problems because he couldn't find it. The only way that he could get that laugh back was to have some whiskey. um, I thought that was pretty funny. But you know, what a memorable role he played. And again, I can't imagine Mark Hamill playing Mozart the
No,
way Tom Hulce did. You know, it's such
I
a
can't imagine him being as nutty. He's too serious. Well, he
yeah.
seems to be too serious.
Well, and whenever you look at Mark Hamill, you think Luke Skywalker. Even if he had a wig on, a
Yeah,
voice, you would just
yeah,
that's what you would think. So
yeah.
it's a shame we can't watch this again because it was such a great film. And I I'm going to do some research into that, see if I can see it. I know we can get little clips of it on YouTube and things
I
like
think
that.
you can actually buy the whole. You can buy the film on Amazon, but you can't. I think you have to just buy it as a download, from what I could see. You can't
Okay.
rent it. You can't. I don't think you can actually physically own it, which
Mm.
is sad.
Yeah, Margaret and I were talking about our VHS collection. Like I said, I don't even have a DVD player anymore. Well, I got get rid of my VCR years and years and years ago. But um, funny to think how things have changed in 40 years, and it's 40 years since this film was released. It's hard to believe, isn't it? This film is 40 years old. I remember my
Yeah.
parents talking to me about old films, and they'd be black and white films. But now we're talking about, you know, these very colorful, very, you know, energetic films, 40 years old. Makes you feel a little bit
I
ancient.
know, it's mad, isn't it? I can remember vividly where I was, who I was with when I
Mm,
watched it. And that's 40 years. That's just mad. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, Margaret. So I would just like to ask you a couple questions, or maybe we can give some advice to authors who want to write books, or astrologers who want to write articles. And you know, from my point of view, and you can chip in as well. If you want to write, you have to write every single day. And if you want to write a book, I always I believe in writing 2,000 words a day, and not having a day off. I think you clear your schedules out and you do it every single day and you get it done. Then you go through the editing process. It might be a little bit painful, a little bit stingy, someone not liking the way you put something out there, but it's all part of being a writer. So you have to be a little bit hard, you know, a little bit hard skinned about it, and listen to your publisher, and not expect the publisher to do all the marketing. I always say this as well. You know, the marketing the book is really more my job as an author. But you know, how do you like to work with authors? What is, you know, what are their habits or their that you appreciate in an author?
I think one of the things I do first of all that I ask is if we can look at our charts together, because it's a very, very close relationship. I think Bernadette Brady said that I've done 2 books with her, and she said that she thinks there should be a rehabilitation course afterwards, so that the author can get back into life without being with a publisher quite so closely. It's a very, very close relationship, and I think if both parties can be open, because and I've got proofreaders as well, who it's very difficult to say to somebody, oh, I kind of get what you're saying, but really, can we not put it that way? You know, you have to find ways, we have to find ways of suggesting that maybe something could be written in a different way, or bring out a different kind of tone or texture to it. And the author needs, as you pointed out earlier on, the author needs to be able to take that on board and not get really precious about the work. I mean, I've written books too, so I know how it feels when someone comes along with a big red pen and says, don't like that, don't like that, you know. So we try to be subtle and supportive, but on the other hand, you need the author not to be too possessive about their work. You know, there are some authors who will spot it. If you deleted a comma without asking their permission, then all hell can break loose, really.
Wow.
So yeah, so I think it's being honest with each other, and understanding we both want the same thing. I think that's why it's important to do the synastry chart, because, or to look at the synastry, because ultimately, if everything's going a bit kind of pear-shaped, you can come back to that point that we both want to create a totally gorgeous book. You want to do it and I want to do it. So how can we best achieve that? So I think being open is hugely important. That's probably above everything else.
Yeah, I don't think we bumped heads ever, thankfully. You know, but because you're a brilliant publisher, because you do have a way of being a Cancer, being sensitive to other people's needs. And by the way, me and Margaret have our birthdays are a day apart. So we're both Cancers. And when we had my talk at Waterstones, we went out for dinner afterwards, and then it was out of 8 people, 9 people, it was a table of 5 Cancerians.
Yeah, that's why it was such a lovely evening.
Yeah, it was a really lovely evening. I was a little bit I was kind of feeling a little bit like I don't know, to kind of I know I got my moon in Leo, but I was awful glad to be off the stage. And just be able to eat and relax and just have a good laugh. And yeah, it was one of those nights that everything just kind of flowed easily, and everyone seemed to get along okay. And so anyway, but do you have any questions like you might want? I mean, anything else that you think that an author should know about before? How would they approach you with an idea for a book, for example?
Well, it's always good to email me and say that you're thinking of doing a particular book. What would we think? Because it's not just my decision. I talk to other people too. You know, is this a topic that's of interest at the moment? Is it something that we would want to do? That's always a good start. And we don't offer a contract until we've seen the whole manuscript. The reason for that is that I used to ask for just the first 3 chapters and make an assessment on that. And then the rest of the book would come in, and sometimes it'd be an absolute train wreck because they put all their effort into the first 3 chapters. And then after that, we did actually have a case of one book where it was just absolutely awful. And by that point, you signed a contract. So it's a lot more touchy. So I think that's a really important thing, to know that you can actually finish the book. You know, I think if we wouldn't publish it, then somebody else might do. So it's always worth, if you want to write a book, if you've got the passion and the knowledge to write a book, you know, go ahead and write it. It shouldn't be on somebody else's say so. And I think that's where I can see if somebody's got the passion, like you with the films, you know, your passion for the films absolutely shines through. And you can also tell if someone's a bit kind of iffy and they're just doing a book because they want to have a book to their name. We can tell the difference. We really can. And I think that's a hugely important thing. Really is.
I think it does make a difference, being an author. I love telling people I'm an author. And there is a great sense of accomplishment because of, the saying is everybody has a book in them. Well, not everybody actually writes them. People
No.
don't always write books and or actually get them published. And a question people ask me is, why didn't I self-publish? And the answer is because I didn't think I could do a good job on my own. I don't have an eye for art. I'm far too impatient and want to write to fiddle around with borders and all the typeface stuff. I just don't have the patience to do it. I wanted to write, and so it was important for me to have a publisher, and to work with Margaret and the rest of her team. And I've got to say I found the whole process pleasant, and I come out feeling accomplished and that I enjoyed it. And but my advice to any writer or anybody who wants to be an author or wants to write is that you just get on with it. Don't worry about moving commas and stuff like that because you can waste a whole day moving commas around. Just
Oh,
write
God,
it.
yeah. Yeah, you need to get the ideas down because once you've got the ideas down, you can work with something and you can draw a lot more out of it. But I just wanted to come back to the marketing thing you mentioned earlier as well. Because obviously we do the best we can when the book comes out. And also we do promote backlists, which other publishers don't. We do that on social media. But it comes back to the passion to spread the word. So although we don't actually refuse anybody because they don't have any social media following, obviously, if you're writing a book and you want people to read it, you must know people that want to read it. You're not going to write a book and then just have it sitting on your desk and nobody reads it. So that's something to bear in mind too. If you're going to write a book, how are you going to get it out there? Why would anybody want to read it? But I think that's an important thing.
And just in general, there's a saying, he that tooteth not his own horn, the same shall not be tooteth. You have to get over that fear of being too shy to promote your work. And as you said, if you're going to spend all this time writing, why are you going to let it just sit on your desk? You want to go to conferences and talk about it. You want to put it on social media. I had a lovely experience yesterday. One of my books didn't get delivered to my address. I had to go pick them up. But I was so tired because I've been to the gym. It was my upper body workout yesterday. So I had absolute noodle arms carrying this 12-kilogram box around trying to get it home. I thought I'm just going to stop by at my local, have a quick Diet Coke, rest my arms, and I have a little chat to people. Oh, what's in the box? And of course, it's full of my newest book, Zeus on the Loose. So it just gave me a little chance, to take it out, admire it. And it's a great feeling. When you look at, when I look at Mirror Mirror, of course, I remember how difficult the charts were, but I also remember what a lot of fun it was to write it and to watch all these films and working with Margaret. Although sometimes I think, in the process of writing the book, there were a few times when I thought, oh my God, this is not going to work. We're not going to get this thing done. We're fussing and I'm losing my mind over these charts, and I can't see. My my prescription needs to be adjusted. I can't actually see what I'm looking at, and but the end result, the end product is, a book that I can say, yeah, a lot of effort went into it, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to do a podcast about it, because I think more people should read it.
Do you know, it changed the way I see films. It dramatically changed the way that I view films, rather, because especially biopics, because you look at the synastry between, as we've done, and it changes the way that you view the film and the casting. The people who do the casting almost certainly wouldn't know astrology or be able to look at charts, and yet they intuitively seem to choose often the people who play the role best. And I think the films that didn't make it were when that synastry didn't happen.
Yeah, Matthew Curry and I were just talking about Communion with Christopher Walken, and I tried so hard to get Christopher Walken, who's my favorite actor in the book, and the books that were biopics. So just to remind you, biopics are films about real life people, and so there was the only biopics he had been in was Catch Me If You Can. He had a really small role of Frank Abagnale's father, or Communion as Whitley Strieber, who was abducted by aliens. And neither of them were strong enough to fit in. Communion was panned by critics. it just didn't have the strong connections that, you know, we were hoping for. And so I could still love Christopher Walken on my own, even though, you know, we couldn't get him in the book. I could still love him. But you know, that's how we made distinctions. And there were others too. About Lenny Bruce with Dustin Hoffman didn't quite get in there. And there were a few others that just weren't big films that didn't quite stick. And for any skeptics out there who are going to say, well, you know, anybody can match planets. Well, I've had really tight orbs of only 1 or 2 degrees, maybe a couple where there's 3 or 4. I never went for the full 8 for conjunctions.
So it had to be really obvious, didn't it?
Yep,
I think, and then I think that's where organising it by planet really worked, because they just leapt out at you, because it was like, well, no, it doesn't fit into this particular one, it doesn't fit into that chapter, and the ones that didn't really fit into any chapter, most of those didn't make it, but the ones that did were like real shining stars, and that was fascinating.
Yeah, and there were so many of them, you know.
Volume 2.
And I was going to say something else about the I wanted to keep the main points really simple. I didn't want to go into every little detail because that would make the book really, really big. And also it's quite boring to play spot the aspect after a while, you know, trying to find it. So I just wanted the big ones. I wanted the oppositions and conjunctions, basically. I didn't use, I tend not to use trines anyway in my practice. I use the harsh aspects, but you know, so I try to really narrow it down in the book. But Margaret, I really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope that, you know, somebody watching this will be inspired to send a manuscript to you, a good one.
Thank you.
I hope that somebody will be inspired to watch another biopic or to go find Amadeus. I'm going to try a little bit harder to see it again. But please do subscribe to this channel. It really, really helps. And give a like, leave some comments of any biopics you'd like to see us cover. If you want to be on the podcast, do drop me a line as well with your favorite biopic. And I got quite a good list of astrologers who want to come in and talk about their favorite biopic. So it's all going really, really well. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing, have a good one, and to the stars.